Merry Christmas, Hanukkah, Kwanzaa Life Day to all of you, and we are back again with another lineup of Christmas reviews. You didn't think I would forget, did you? Are you kidding me? It was probably the most fun I had last year. Granted, it got a little emotional by the very end, but nevertheless, I'm back again for another chockload. Some new, some old, but nevertheless, all festive. And of course, as we are setting up with our new tradition, last year, of course, we did one of my favorite adaptations of A Christmas Carol. Yes, we're still doing that. I decided this time, let's jump back to one of the more classic retellings of A Christmas Carol. This time, the film simply called Scrooge, and thank God it's called Scrooge. I don't know how many times I could say A Christmas Carol. This one is starring Alastair Sim. I was recommended to jump on this one first. I will admit, I was very excited to jump into this one because many people told me that was definitely one of the ones that deserves attention. And you know what? I am definitely in firm agreement with them. This adaptation of that is actually probably one of the best I've ever seen. And when I say best I've ever seen, I mean visually. It's probably one of the most beautiful looking productions I've ever seen. And that says a lot considering this film was done in black and white. Some of the shots are absolutely gorgeous to behold. The use of shadow, the use of atmosphere, it is just breathtaking. And this is one of the few adaptations of... Caught myself there. This is one of the few adaptations of A Christmas Carol. Damn it! Where it actually was trying to be a ghost story, which is pretty much what Charles Dickens intended when he wrote it. It was meant to have a bit of a fear factor angle to it, something to make the reader just as scared as Scrooge, because anything that could scare Scrooge is logically going to scare anyone else. And I gotta say, this is one of the ones where there were so many inspired moments. Even though this film was made in 1951, a lot of the techniques they used, even if you're aware of what they did in order to accomplish it, you still are applauding because they're still really inspired tactics. And some of it is a touch hokey, a little Twilight Zone. It still works. There were some things I did find myself laughing at, specifically during the Ghost of Christmas Past segment when the transition of time was illustrated by a ring of clouds and a zooming in hourglass, but it does the job. And the thing is, when you're doing an adaptation of A Christmas Carol, you don't really need to resort to over-the-top tactics. Not every adaptation needs Scrooge flying through the air with Gonzo and Rizzo in tow. We'll get to that one year. But this one just keeps it subtle, keeps it simple, and just is more focused on moving the story along. And the one thing I gotta say about this particular version, this one added in a lot of things, which I admit I still have not yet read the book. There are some things in this film adaptation, some plot points that I can understand why they've been cut in other versions, but seeing them here anyway actually enriched a lot of things I didn't really know about Scrooge as a character. You see Scrooge with Marley do some pretty horrific things, even to people that Scrooge actually had affection for. You actually get to see what Scrooge did to Fezziwig, and even more so in his relationship with, normally the character's name is Belle, but in this case it's Alice. You find out down the line she actually decided to go on and help the poor. And I was delighted to see all that. Because normally when you watch any other version of A Christmas Carol, they always hit the familiar story beats. And it's always nice to see a little extra something that you didn't really think that you were going to see. And I'm honestly delighted that it took me all the way till now to sit down and watch this particular version. Of course, the big question, how was Alastair Sim as Ebenezer Scrooge? Well, I can happily say, and I have seen a lot of different takes on the character. Some really great, some and some Well, I can definitely tell you now, beyond a shadow of a doubt, Alastair Sim is probably one of the best Scrooges I have ever seen. I know it's a very bold statement, but the one thing that made him stand out more than anything else was his subtlety. Now, we've seen a lot of different takes on it where they always feel the need to go over the top, and you usually don't mind because a lot of times it's perfectly copacetic with the tone of the way they're approaching the story. But because this one is actually trying to be a lot more serious and actually try to tell the story with a bit more conviction and a much more dramatic weight, Alastair Sim, I was totally into from the beginning. And I think one of the things that really sets the tone for a production of A Christmas Carol, and it's an important one, you gotta set up your Scrooge in the beginning to show how truly cruel he is, because unfortunately, because this story has been adapted so many times, a lot of us can practically quote the dialogue from memory. What matters is how the actor playing Scrooge delivers these familiar lines. And Alastair Sim has such a great coldness to him. And he has this demeanor, he has this scowl on his face. This is a man you do not want to approach, even if you absolutely have to, because you have to do business with him. Even the people who do business with him, you can see, just don't want to be in the same room with this man. This is important because you got to set up the stakes of how hard do you think the spirits are going to have to work in order to get him to turn. The other thing that really works is that he handles that transition beautifully. And then when you see, of course, the inevitable finale, when he is saved and he realizes he still has time, it's absolutely joyous. I was laughing. First person he sees is his maid, Mrs. Dilber. He starts doing a handstand.
I must stand him ahead.
Mrs. Scrooge, I think you're going to have to be sectioned. This one point is probably the part where I'm like, oh, this is a touch awkward. And I think a lot of it has to do with just how deadly serious the movie is all the way through. I think the film had a bit of an issue trying to show how happy he is, that they may have accidentally went just a little too far. But fortunately, once we get past that bit and start going through all the other great spots, it finds its footing again. I suppose the other con I have with this movie is that some of the side performances with the other characters, I felt compared to Alastair Sim, the rest of them were definitely left some wanting. Some were a touch underwhelming, especially Marley. I admit a bit of personal bias when it comes to the portrayal of Marley, because I myself played Marley one time, so I have kind of a set concept of how I feel Marley should be portrayed, where the first time he appears, he should be scary as all get out, and not so over the top that he's almost a cartoon character, and that's where I kind of feel the actor playing Marley went when he arrives on the scene. I wasn't feeling the dramatic weight of his torment, and I honestly just felt like I was watching the live-action manifestation of Goofy's take on Marley. So that really wasn't working for me. Fortunately, what does work afterwards is when he leaves and Scrooge sees all the rest of the tormented spirits all trying to throw spectral currency at the poor in some vain attempt to try and redeem themselves, and you see the look of despair on their faces, realizing that's too late. That, on the other hand, I thought was absolutely inspired. So it kind of made up for a lackluster Marley scene. Ghost Christmas Past, I've seen different variations on it. I'd still say Joel Grey and the Patrick Stewart one's a touch creepy, but we'll get to that at a later time. This one kind of looked like a reject from Hogwarts. I actually would wager this is probably what Professor Binns from Harry Potter might have looked like had he actually been portrayed on film. And his delivery was a touch wooden, but simultaneously he still hits the point across, but he still didn't etch himself into my memory like a lot of other versions do. The Ghost of Christmas Future Present is a touch odd as well, because there's a lot of scenes where you're seeing what's going on, especially the old Joe scene. That's an important scene, but the funny thing is, it plays for a good long while before you even notice that Scrooge and the Spirit are even in the room. Because at first we're like, where's our guides? Usually you should always start with Scrooge walking in on the scene, but we don't really get that. So some of the scene transitions are a touch clunky. But in the grand scheme, this all still is minor nitpicking. In the long run, this is still a wonderful take on it. And if you're still looking for a traditional take on A Christmas Carol, this is one I would actually say prioritize seeing. A lot of the scenes really play up the dramatic weight. I would say I was really feeling a lot of the emotions that I need to feel at the key moments, particularly with the Cratchits, and definitely with Nephew Fred. It's actually one of the few I've encountered where Nephew Fred isn't portrayed as a douchebag. Even the Muppets couldn't do that right. Shame on you! So really, 1951 Scrooge with Alastair Sim is definitely a good one to watch. And for modern audiences, if you have already watched all your go-to versions of A Christmas Carol, and you want to watch something that may make you feel a little bit more down at home, a bit more traditional, even one that you might want to watch with your grandparents, or just with your regular parents, or just any extended family, I'm definitely going to give this one Do you agree? Do you disagree? Do you think that there were way better adaptations of A Christmas Carol? Or are you too drunk to really discern one way or another? Leave it all in the comments below. And for more festive content on Narcotic Casserole, simply like, share, subscribe, click. Now shalt be served.
And so, as Tiny Tim observed, God bless us, everyone.